Hello everyone. Welcome to the first official lecture of this class. We are going to take just a minute here and actually talk about how things are going to flow. So for each quiz, there's going to be a series of lectures. Again, don't forget to have reviewed your syllabus and make sure you know which lectures go with which quizzes. But here's how I would suggest that you study. I would suggest that you take the PowerPoints that are provided, and they are provided in PDF form, so that hopefully you can print multiple pages per page and actually save yourself from paper if you're going to print them. Or you can actually take them and put them into some sort of digital format and type some notes or take some notes with them. But what I want you to do is use the PowerPoints as sort of an outline along with that study guide that hopefully you also downloaded. And that one I would actually download and print. I would actually have a physical copy of the study guide. And hopefully you got that. And if you didn't, you want to go back to module 1.1 and get the study guide and make sure you've gotten that study guide. So what I'm going to be doing, or what you will hear other professors doing, because again, I already said this once, but I'll say it again, some of the lectures are recorded by me and some of the lectures are recorded by some of the other professors that kind of co-created this course, is when we go through the PowerPoints, what we are going to be doing is hitting some of the highlights of it and telling you some additional stories, telling you some of our additional experience with these, and trying to make it sort of like real and come alive and help you connect what we're talking about, because it's going to be really biology heavy, with things that are a little more interesting or with things that will help you connect it with your life so that hopefully it will stick in your memory better. But again, as you review, what I want you to do is take the notes, take the study guide, and take these PowerPoints here, or the PDF of the PowerPoint here, and go back and read the corresponding material, because you're going to see that we're going to gloss over some things. And if we gloss over it, that means that you don't necessarily need to spend a ton of time focusing on that part of the book. Just kind of glance over it, make sure you understand it, and move on. But if we spend 5 or 10 minutes of a lecture talking about one topic, you better believe we're going to want you to know that topic, and you're going to want to make sure you read that section of the book very, very carefully. So that's sort of how to gauge which parts we really want you to focus on. Now, that being said, this very first set of notes here is, we're calling it systems biology. Basically, this is a little bit of a review, just in case, particularly for some of our psych majors that may or may not have actually had a biology class, particularly an anatomy class. Again, this semester we're going to be talking about how the brain and the nervous system in particular as a whole affects your behavior. And we thought it would be important to understand not just your nervous system, but some of the rest of your organ systems as well, kind of what the rest of your body is also doing. Just as a very simple example that we'll talk a lot more about later in the semester, your brain and your nervous system sort of has another system that's kind of like its best friend, and we call that one the endocrine system. And so we're going to talk a lot about how those two systems work together to help you produce a lot of the different behaviors that you produce. So what I'm going to be doing here in this first lecture is reviewing some of the other organ systems that you had in your body. Now, again, this is not in your textbook, so because of that, there are a lot of different PDFs in this first set of notes on module 1.2 that you're going to want to go and look at if you have not had any of this information before, if you've never had a biology or an anatomy class before. The rest of it, again, you'll go back and you'll reference your textbook. We won't be giving you quite as much material on the actual slides. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's talk a little bit about some of your other organ systems. So the first thing is just, what are the different systems that you have? Well, you have actually a whole bunch that are all working together to help you do the things that your body needs to do. I'm going to show it to you here again, first in list form, and then we'll sort of look at it in picture form. The first one is probably the weirdest to say, but it's actually your biggest, or it's got your biggest organ in it. It's the integumentary system, which actually contains the organ of your skin, which is actually your largest organ. Most people don't think about your skin as being an organ, but it is. right? And its main job is to keep stuff in that's supposed to be in and keep stuff out, like dirt and germs, that's supposed to be out. Also does some other things like helping you regulate temperature and a lot of different things. But that's the main organ of the integumentary system. Then you have your respiratory system, which works very heavily, well, I'm going to skip one, with your circulatory system to help bring in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. And that oxygen gets where it needs to go, courtesy of your circulatory system and the blood that's within your circulatory system. And the carbon dioxide that's produced by all of the cells in and around your body as a waste product is gotten rid of thanks to your circulatory system, delivering it back to the lungs of your respiratory system so that you get rid of it. So again, you're going to see a lot of cooperation amongst these different organ systems. So again, we're going to sort of just walk through them very, very quickly. Again, here in picture form, let's talk about some of them. Again, here's that first system that I talked to you about, the integumentary system. Again, this is the one that is with the biggest organ of the system being the skin. And again, it's keeping things out that are supposed to be out and keeping things in that are supposed to be in. So again, for example, it's keeping in liquid that's supposed to stay in. It will also do some other things like help protect you from injury. It contains some of your sensory organs as part of your nervous system. So it gives them a nice convenient place to reside so that you can feel when things touch you, for example. The next system that we're going to spend most of the semester talking about would be the nervous system here. So you can see you've got a nice lovely brain and a spinal cord that runs down, but then you've got a whole bunch of other nerve systems that run all throughout the periphery of your body. We'll talk a lot more about that. The next two systems tend to work together a lot to help you produce any and all movements that you might want to move and might want to do. So that would be your muscular system, but the muscles themselves aren't going to be able to make you move unless they pull on a bone, and that's what actually helps you to move. So your muscular system pulls on the bones of the skeletal system, and that's what helps you to move around. So as I was typing some notes earlier today, or as I was typing a text earlier today, the muscles in my hands were actually pulling on the bones in my fingers and in my hands to actually make them move. I mentioned earlier the circulatory system, so that's pumping all that blood all around your body, delivering nutrient, delivering oxygen, taking away waste products. We're going to talk a lot this semester about the endocrine system. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the endocrine system is kind of like the best friend of the nervous system. They work together. The endocrine system is also sort of a communication system within the body. It delivers messages around the body that something needs to change, something needs to happen. It's just a lot slower, and it serves a slightly different function than the nervous system does. But that's why they're sort of best friends, is that they're doing things kind of together and they're giving each other feedback and they're helping each other out. Here's a few more here. Oop, I went a little bit too far, excuse me there. So the next one is your lymphatic system. Most people don't even know they have a lymphatic system, but you do. If you've ever been sick and you kind of felt those swollen nodules in your neck, that's sort of what you were checking. You had swollen lymph nodes, but you actually have a whole system of lymph nodes that are all over your body. And they do a number of different things, but some of what they are doing is to help collect and return fluid into the bloodstream, but they are also responsible for housing and helping you when you are fighting off an infection. And so they're sort of cooperating with the immune system. It is not the immune system exactly, it's a separate system, but they're cooperating with the immune system. As I mentioned earlier, you have the respiratory system, which is bringing in oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. It is cooperating with the circulatory system. You have the digestive system next, and its job is to help you bring in food and liquid, to break it down into its simplest and most basic forms so that you can then take in those simple and basic forms, distribute them around your body, and use them to make whatever it is that you need to make, if it's some kind of hormone that you're going to make, or if it's some sort of tissue type that you're going to make, whatever it is that it might be. Your digestive system also helps you to break down substances that should not be in your body, or it helps to clean out various things. Your liver does a lot of breaking down various toxins and things in your body. So for example, if you take in some sort of drug in your body, even if it's a legal substance, for example, I'm going to take in some sort of painkiller because I have injured myself, the liver is going to help me break down that painkiller and ultimately get it out of my body. But it can't only function by itself. It actually needs to cooperate with a secondary system called the urinary system. And the urinary system is basically your kidneys and a storage tank called the bladder for holding any and all waste products that the kidneys have filtered out of the blood. And any and all waste product is then stored in that bladder, and it comes out of your body in the form of urine. So the digestive system is taking in food, and it will break down all of that product. It will also break down some other stuff that may happen to get into your body. And it will also get rid of anything that is not digested, but it will only get rid of that solid stuff. So a lot of people will confuse the digestive system and the urinary system, I suppose because they each produce a bathroom product, maybe, is the best way to word that. But your digestive system, the end result of anything that is not digested, is going to come out in the form of feces, right? Anything else, for example, anything that the liver broke down or anything like that, is actually going to get dumped back into the bloodstream. And that's actually then going to be the job of the kidneys and the urinary system to filter it out of the blood, and it's going to be passed on into the urine and ultimately gotten rid of that way. So they're actually two separate systems. Now again, they're cooperating, but there's two separate systems. And then finally, there are the reproductive, I actually call them reproductive systems because they're slightly different depending on what set of sexual organs that you have developed. And I specifically worded it that way because technically, very, very early on in development, you actually have the precursors for both. And it depends on what hormones you are exposed to as to which will go on to develop, whether or not you will develop testes and a penis, or whether or not you will develop ovaries and a uterus. But nonetheless, the sort of overall goal of having a reproductive system is why we called it just that, is so that ultimately, if you wanted to, you would be able to reproduce. So again, just super quickly, those are some of the other types of organ systems. And a lot of what your brain is doing, your nervous system is doing, is sort of monitoring what all of these other systems are up to, and if needed, sending them messages in one way or another to do something different, to do something extra, or to stop doing something. So it's pretty neat that your brain is sort of, or excuse me, keep calling it the brain. What I'm meaning to say is nervous system, that your nervous system is sort of kind of like the control center for all of these others, and it's collecting information and then sending back information. All right, let's take one quick step back. So I'm talking a lot about organ systems here, but let's start off at an even more basic level. So what are you even made of, all right? So I was saying earlier, let's talk about that integumentary system, right? The system itself is made up of several different organs, right? Organs are made up of different tissues. And tissues are made up of different cells, right? The example that's shown here is actually, all right, your circulatory system. And as you can see, it's got a lot of different organs. It's got the main organ, which would be the heart, but it's also got a series of veins and arteries, right? You've also got smaller, even capillaries in there. So you've got a bunch of different organs that make up the entire organ system, right? Within just the one organ of the heart, you've got a number of different kinds of tissues that make up that organ. Right? And then making up one kind of tissue, for example, here you would have some very cardiac cells that are making up that one kind of tissue. So if you start from the smallest and work up, we would argue that cells make up tissues. Tissues, different kinds of tissues, make up organs. Organs make up organ systems. And that's basically how you're built. And every other system in your body is built. It's starting with cells as building blocks. Those cells go on to make various kinds of tissues. Those tissues go on to make various kinds of organs. And then depending on the organ system, it will have a number of different organs in it that make up the system. As far as tissues in your body, again, they are groups of cells and various substances that work together to do a specialized task. You actually have four main kinds of tissues in your body. You have epithelial tissue, you have connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And some of those are probably obvious as to what they're doing. For example, muscle tissue, right, would be to help with building of muscles. Nervous tissue is going to be found in the nervous system. Epithelial tissue is typically found, for example, in your skin, but there's some other places, for example, in your digestive tract and some things. And then connective tissue is doing what that sounds like. It's using to connect various things. But again, Tissues are made up of groups of cells, and there are 4 main types of tissues. I've already been giving you as this hint, but again, your body's largest organ is actually your skin, and it's doing a lot of very important things. It stretches, so you are protected when you are moving. It doesn't just rip and tear apart, so the tissues that make up your skin, or even the individual cells that make up the tissues that make up your skin as an organ, don't separate from each other whenever you are moving. That's a very good thing. You wouldn't want that to happen. It helps you to conserve water so that you don't lose all the water that needs to stay within your body. It can actually repair itself when you're damaged. You've probably experienced that before. If you've ever cut or scraped your skin, you've probably formed some kind of scab, and then after a few days, that scab healed over and eventually went away, and you had what looked to be new skin underneath. Again, helps to keep things in that you want in, and helps to keep things out that you want out. Helps you to regulate your body temperature. It actually helps you to produce vitamin D. And it helps you to receive some external stimulus information because it provides a nice, comfortable home for your sensory receptors that are located within your skin tissue that are actually then sent to your brain, a certain part of your brain that helps you to say, hey, something just touched my arm, or my head itches, whatever that might be. A little bit more about your circulatory system. Again, the job of the circulatory system is to move things around your body, and it does so by having it basically float around in the blood that it's pumping around the body. So it's allowing cells to exchange various substances. It's allowing cells to receive things that it might need, like oxygen or nutrient, because again, that stuff is floating around in the blood and it's then taken other places. And the reason this is a bonus is because otherwise the only way we would have to get stuff from cell to cell to cell would be through what we call interstitial fluid, right? So basically the cells are sort of bathed in a fluid, and we could let stuff diffuse out of the cell and sort of float around in that fluid and hope to get to the next cell, right? It could do that, but that would take a lot longer. And as big as our body is, it would probably take forever to get stuff where it needs to go. Especially, for example, your brain, which is in constant need of its food source, which is glucose. So it's definitely a lot faster that we can just take a bunch of glucose, have it floating around in the blood, and just send that blood up, right, up to the brain very quickly, right, and deliver it right there. Right? So the circulatory system is made up of a number of different organs. Again, the heart itself, the blood vessels, which includes veins and arteries, and actually the blood itself is considered to actually be an organ. And again, because it's delivering stuff elsewhere and taking stuff away, the circulatory system works and cooperates with a whole bunch of different systems. It works with the respiratory system for that oxygen-carbon dioxide exchange. It works with the endocrine system. So anytime the endocrine system makes a hormone that it needs to deliver somewhere, it's going to use the circulatory system to deliver it. If the immune system needs to deliver some white blood cells to go attack something, it's going to use the circulatory system. Same thing with the lymphatic system. If the digestive system has broken something down, let's say it's now digested all that sugar that you just ate, and so now it's going to deliver that sugar to the various cells. It's going to dump that sugar into the circulatory system so that sugar can be delivered somewhere. And then, as I was telling you earlier with the urinary system, that circulatory system is periodically going to need to be cleaned out, particularly the blood itself is going to need to be cleaned out to make sure that there's the appropriate level of whatever is supposed to be in there. And so that is the main job of the urinary system. So there's a lot of crosstalk between the organ systems. Okay. As I mentioned before, and again, don't spend too much time on this, but there are 2 major blood flow pathways in the body. The pulmonary circuit is the big circuit, is the smaller circuit that sends that oxygen-poor blood to the lungs to get new oxygen and then back to the heart. Because again, the blood has been out in the body, which is the systemic circuit. So the blood now has a whole bunch of oxygen. It's been filled up by the lungs. And so the body is going to send it out, the heart is going to send it out to the body so that it can be delivered elsewhere. All the oxygen can be delivered to all of your various tissues and cells, right? And it's going to exchange it for carbon dioxide, and then it's going to come back to the heart. That's the systemic circuit. right? But once it does that and it's got a whole bunch of carbon dioxide in it, it's going to come back and it's going to need to go through the pulmonary circuit again. So it's got a bunch of carbon dioxide in it, not very much oxygen. It's going to quickly go to the lungs, get rid of the carbon dioxide, bring in some new oxygen so that it can go back to the systemic circuit and be pumped out to the body again. So your body is constantly doing this cycle, right? So that it can not only bring in oxygen, but expel that carbon dioxide. And why is oxygen so important? Well, because all living cells require it. Your cells need oxygen to do what they do, to make energy, to break down various resources, to build things. Your brain needs it just to function. So again, you need oxygen. So you need the circulatory system delivering that oxygen and carrying away the carbon dioxide. Right? So how does the body actually get that oxygen that it needs? Well, yes, partly it's because it's getting it because of the blood, but what's actually happening is that there's something called gas exchange that's occurring within a specific part, right, of the lungs and the circulatory system. So you have this really cool cooperation system, right, between the circulatory system and the respiratory system. So deep down in your lungs, right, if you were to go way, 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 way down into your lungs, it almost kind of looks like broccoli. Have you ever looked at what broccoli looks like, right? Like they have this really big main stalk and then it kind of branches out into these little tiny green bulbs at the end. Okay, well, it's not green, right? But that's sort of what the shape of it looks like in your lungs, right? And then that's covered over by sort of a big pink tissue that sort of looks like the lung. But inside those big pink tissues, it looks like these little broccoli things, right? So what happens is that you breathe in, right, and the air comes in there, and all of those little broccoli things are covered by these tiny little things of capillaries, these little tiny blood vessels, right, that are ultimately filled with blood that's got a lot of carbon dioxide in it. And as you breathe in, you're breathing in air that's got a lot of oxygen in it, and that's where the gas exchange occurs. The carbon dioxide that's in your blood goes into the actual lung part. The oxygen that's in your lung part goes into the blood, right? And then the carbon dioxide gets breathed out by you, and the blood gets the new batch of oxygen and can then ship it around your body. So it's a really, really cool process. But this can also be why it's such a problem, for example, if you get water in your lungs, or if you get a fluid buildup in your lungs, or if you get some sort of infection, you get a bacterial buildup in your lungs. This is why COVID was so dangerous for so many people, and why they were having oxygen problems. Because again, even if they could breathe a little bit, the problem was there was so much liquid and stuff and junk and goo and yuckiness in their lungs, this oxygen exchange wasn't able to occur as efficiently. And so they weren't able to get the new oxygen into their blood to then be pumped around into their body. And that caused a lot of downstream problems. Again, as we talked about, your skeletal system, if it's gonna, one of the jobs is to help you move around. And again, it's gonna do that by being pushed and pulled by the muscles of your body. So your skeletal system is actually gonna interact with your muscular system to help you move around, but it also helps you to do other things like maintain your posture and things like that. But your skeletal system is actually doing a whole lot more than that. You don't just have a skeletal system just for movement. It does help you to move, and it does help you to actually support yourself, right? So it gives a support system and an anchor for those muscles, right? But it is also doing a couple other things. One of the other things is basic protection. Think about your skull, right? It's providing a nice, hard, basically package or container that your brain sits in, so that your brain is hopefully nice and cushioned and protected by that nice, hard skull. Very similarly for your lungs and your heart, you've got nice hard ribs that keep your lungs and your heart fairly protected. So some of your bones are actually helping to protect other organs of your body. Your bones are also very important for storing various minerals. Calcium is one of the bigger ones. This is why some older individuals that aren't storing calcium as well, or aren't taking in enough calcium, your body will start to borrow calcium from their bones, and your bones start to get a little bit more weak, and you might have something, the extreme form of it would be osteoporosis, but you might have more susceptibility to having a broken bone or a cracked bone if you were to fall, for example, if you get older. So your bones are responsible for mineral storage. And then finally, your bones are also responsible for certain kinds of blood cells being formed. This is what your bone marrow is doing. If you've ever heard of something like a bone marrow transplant, this is why that might be important. It's because parts of your bones are helping to form blood cells. Again, I talked already about the digestive system versus the urinary system and how people seem to get these confused a little bit. So make sure that you don't get these confused. Digestion is taking in your food or your liquid, getting the nutrients out for your body. And then again, anything that can't be broken down by your digestive system is going to be excreted in the form of fecal material, but it's usually solid fecal material. Whereas your urinary system is cleaning out the blood. And it's also going to produce a bathroom product, but for a completely different reason. It's cleaning out your blood, getting rid of anything that you might have extra of, extra water, extra salt. Again, if you've broken down some sort of product, like you took a painkiller or something, and now you've broken that down, your body's going to get rid of all that and clean out your blood thanks to your urinary system. And the product that it produces is urine that helps you to get rid of it. As you might imagine, your immune system is important because it's helping you defend yourself from anything that is not yourself. Now, if it is something that is really dangerous, like a virus or a bacteria, this is a really great thing, right? This is going to hopefully keep you from getting sick, hopefully keep you from having any sort of tissue damage, or at least long-term tissue damage. But your immune system can also be super annoying when it's fighting off things that aren't actually going to hurt you. For example, like pollen, which really isn't going to hurt you, but it's going to cause this really big, huge immune system response because your immune system is trying really hard to fight off that pollen for you. And if you're like me and you suffer from seasonal allergies, you know that you're going, thank you, immune system, but you could have saved this energy for a real invasion like, a bacteria or a virus, but thank you anyway. Nonetheless, your immune system has 3 lines of defense. The first one is called just your surface barriers. So this would be, again, your skin is another functioning of your immune system here, just keeping stuff out that you don't want in. But this would also be like mucous membranes and stuff. Tears in your eyes actually keep stuff from getting in through your eyes. You also have some actual blood cells. We typically call these white blood cells in your body that actually function as your immune system. You have some that are non-specific, and that basically just means that if they say anything that does not belong to your body, even pollen, they're going to try to kill it and get rid of it. But then you also are able to do something called adaptive immunity, which is where your body can remember something that it has seen before and then a lot faster be able to get rid of it in the future. And this is the concept behind vaccinations, is that we give you a little piece of a virus usually, or sometimes we give you a dead virus so that you can't actually get sick from the virus, but that your body can go, hey, I've seen that before, and can make antibodies. And then the next time you get exposed to it, you might not even know you've been exposed because your body was able to a lot faster go, hey, I've seen that, and kill it off very quickly. So again, your immune system has a lot of different lines of defense, the whole purpose of it being just to keep you healthy and safe and to keep you from coming across something that could make you sick and potentially damage you. Again, you have innate versus adaptive immunity. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, and I don't necessarily need you to necessarily remember a whole bunch of this, but just know that, again, innate immunity is things that you're just able to do that you don't necessarily have to, your body doesn't have to necessarily remember. It'll just kind of kill off anything. And then adaptive immunity is when it's specifically trying to remember something. This is where the category of vaccines would fall under, is forcing your body to have adaptive memory and adaptive immunity. A little bit also, as I said earlier, your lymphatic system cooperates a lot with your immune system. It's sort of like blood circulation in how it sort of appears. It's got these tube-like vesicles that are filled with fluid that's called lymph. Lymph is the fluid that's circulating around your lymphatic system. It contains a number of cells called lymphocytes. But it's helping to sort of move some of those lymphocytes around. It also is going to help activate your B and T cells, which is part of your immune system whenever you're producing an immune response, which is why you get those swollen lymph nodes when you happen to be sick, because again, your lymph system is helping to activate those B and T cells. So again, your lymphatic system is cooperating along with your immune system. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to hear a lot more about the endocrine system later, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but the endocrine system is also able to send messages throughout your body in the form of hormones. Those hormones are delivered thanks to the circulatory system, and those hormones can cause any number of different kinds of changes in the body. Now, most of the time when people think of a hormone, they think straight of the sex organs, and that is true. Our sex organs do make and use hormones to produce the effects that they produce, but there's a ton of different kinds of hormones in your body. So for example, after you've eaten a meal, hopefully your body will also release some insulin, which is another kind of hormone, to make sure that your blood sugar does not get too high and that your blood sugar stays within an appropriate range, and it helps with proper digestion and that sort of thing. So your endocrine system is producing a ton of different kinds of hormones that are helping your body regulate itself and helping you produce appropriate behaviors at appropriate times. And that's why you're going to see us talk a lot about a cooperation between the nervous system and the endocrine system. The nervous system part is going to be the hypothalamus. You're going to hear about that a lot, and you're going to hear that the hypothalamus is going to be sending messages to a part of the endocrine system called the pituitary gland, and they are going to be sending messages to each other a lot. So you're going to hear this is called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, so the HPA axis. You'll hear about that a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit more later in the semester, but again, you're going to hear a lot about these two guys. They're definitely best friends. The nervous system and the endocrine system. And then finally, we are talking a little bit about the reproductive system. And again, the reproductive system give and receive, or I should say make and receive hormones via the endocrine system. But again, the overall goal would be to prepare you and, or in the case of a female body, to produce the ability to create a new human. Right, so the male gonads are called testes. They secrete testosterone and help produce the sperm. The sperm travel through a series of various ducts, and there's various accessory glands that help empty into those ducts that support and supply stuff that actually keep the semen active and healthy until it's ready to then be released. The female system produces its own gonad, which is called an ovary, or out of the ovary, which is called an egg. The more formal word is called an oocyte. It also secretes two different hormones, an estrogen hormone and a progesterone-like hormone. It's got this endometrium, which lines the uterus, which prepares that uterus, which is like basically the storage container where if a new human is going to be created, that is where the new human would be created. The uterus will then protect that human, supply that human with nutrient and a warm, comforting environment. And it will also help to form a secondary thing called the placenta, which is necessary if a woman is pregnant and growing a new human inside of her. So again, a lot of different organ systems here. The big takeaway from this first lecture is just this. The nervous system can't do it on its own. Right? The nervous system's job, and you're going to hear this later on too, is to monitor what's going on in the environment. And that's the external environment around you, as well as the internal environment going on within your body, right? Analyze what's happening and then decide if you need to produce a response. And if you do need to produce a response, it's going to probably have to depend on a lot of these other organ systems to help it to produce that response. So your nervous system is sort of kind of like the control master saying, all right, I need you to do this, and I need you to do this, and I need you to do this. And if we all work together, we can get this done, right? And I need you to be watching out for this, and I need you to get me that report because I need to know what's going on with this, and I need to know what's going on with that. So the nervous system sort of acts as kind of like the control, getting in all the information, gathering all the information, deciding what to do, and then handing out the tasks to everybody else so that your body as a whole can hopefully remain as healthy as possible within your environment. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will be in touch.